Intro Algebra Lesson 2-2B. Yesterday we were talking about adding positive and negative numbers, and we had three sets of rules. One, if you add a positive and a positive, you get more positives. If you add a negative and a negative, you get more negatives. And then the situation where if you add positives and negatives, you have to ask yourself a question. One, do I have more positives or negatives? Because the answer to that tells us the sign of the answer we're going to get. And then number two, how many more? So we have to use those each one of our situations. Now, these are properties of addition. Properties mean there are things that we are allowed to do with addition. There's some benefits to addition that some of the other properties or other operations don't have. For example, subtraction doesn't have very much right to do very many things, whereas addition does. One of ours is what we call the commutative property. The commutative property basically says that the order in which we add things does not matter. We can add in any order we want. So for example, 5 plus 4 plus 2. 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 plus 2 is 11, right? Is going to be the same as 2 plus 4 plus 5. It's still going to be 11. 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 plus 5 is 11. The order doesn't matter. So the commutative property takes the numbers and can switch them around. This does not work with subtraction. 5 minus 4 is 1, but 4 minus 5 is negative 1. Big difference. So the addition property allows us to do more things. We have what we call the associative property. Now, if you associate with something, it's kind of what your group is. So the associative property would say, if you had 5 plus 4 in parentheses, and you added those two together, and then you added 2, 5 plus 4 is 9, 9 plus 2 is 11, that if I keep the same order of the numbers, 5, 4, 2, but instead of a parentheses around the 5 and the 4, I put the parentheses around the 4 and the 2. Notice the order is the same. 5, 4, 2, 5, 4, 2, but the parentheses are different. Then the answer will still be the same. Because over here, 4 plus 2 is 6, and 6 plus 5 is still 11. So changing the parentheses will not affect the answer. Now I caution you. If you were to see this, most people think this is an example of associative property because they see the parentheses. Just because it has parentheses does not mean it's associative property. Look at the order. 5, 4, 2. 2, 5, 4. The order is different. If the order is different, that's commutative property. This would actually be an example of commutative property. So be careful about that. Don't just assume because you see parentheses that it's automatically going to be associative. Okay? We also have what we call the identity property. The identity property is pretty simple. It's not too tough. It basically states that if you take any number and you add 0, you'll be exactly where you were before. So 5 plus 0 equals 5. 4 plus 0 equals 4. It's identical to what it started with. Negative 2 plus 0 equals negative 2. Dogs plus 0 equals dogs. So the order isn't an issue right now. It's the fact that we're adding 0. It will be identical to what it began with. And our last property of addition is what we would call the property of 0, also known as the inverse property. And this is pretty simple as well. It just means if you take any number and you add its opposite, you'll always get 0. Any number plus its opposite will always equal 0. These are all special properties for addition. Commutative has the order doesn't matter. Associative says the grouping doesn't matter. Identity says if you add 0, you stay where you are. And the property of 0 says that a number and its opposite will always equal 0. So these are all properties for addition, not for subtraction. Alright, example number 1. Evaluate the expression for the given value of x. In other words, we're going to tell you what x equals. We want to know what the expression would equal if we plug that value in. So here we have 8 plus x plus negative 6, semicolon x equals 3. We need to take this 3 and plug it in for x. Once we substitute it in, you've got 8 plus 3 plus negative 6. Remember, you can add in any order that you want. I'm going to put all the positives together. 8 plus 3 is 11. Now I'm adding a positive and a negative. I'm supposed to ask myself, do I have more positives or do I have more negatives? I have more positives. The second question is, how many more? 5 more positives. This would equal 5. So as far as evaluating, if x really is 3, then I would get 5 for this expression. If x changes to something else, then so would the value of my expression. All right, one more. A little bigger now. 3 minus 5 plus x plus negative 4 minus 3 plus x plus negative 7 if x equals negative 6. So I have to put this negative 6 anywhere that I see an x. Can't just put it in for one of the x's. I have to put that in for all of them. And from there, it's order of operations. So I would have 3 minus 5 plus that negative 6 plus a negative 4. A little bit of a delay on the smartboard. Minus 3 plus negative 6 plus negative 7. Now everything's been plugged in. We have to go from left to right. So if I start here, 3 minus 5, I'm at 3 and I go backwards to the left. 5 would put me at negative 2 plus negative 6 plus negative 4 minus 3 plus negative 6 plus negative 7. I got to keep going left to right. Now negatives plus negatives makes more negatives. So negative 2 plus negative 6 plus negative 4 would give me negative 12. So all of this is negative 12. Then I have a minus 3 plus negative 6. Man, this delay is terrible today. Negative 6 plus negative 7. Now, if I didn't have this subtraction problem right here, I could do everything in any order I want to because of the commutative property. But unfortunately, I got to keep going from left to right. Now, if I'm at negative 12, if you thought about this as a number line and right here was negative 12, subtracting 3 can't make me go this way. Subtracting 3 has to make me go to the left. This is minus 3. So I would actually be right here at negative 15. So negative 12 minus 3 is negative 15 plus negative 6 plus negative 7. Now I have just addition, and all of them are negatives. Negatives plus negatives makes more negatives. I can add in any order I want. If it's easiest to add these two, do it. If you want to add these two and then add on the negative 15, it doesn't matter. Negative 15 and negative 6 is negative 21. Negative 21 plus negative 7 makes negative 28. So according to this, if I were to evaluate that very long expression with a negative 6 plugged in for x in 2 locations, I would do all the math. It's all addition and subtraction, so I have to go from left to right, and I would get a finishing answer of negative 28. Watch your signs. Remember, negatives plus negatives makes more negatives. Positives plus positives makes more positives. But if it's a positive and a negative, you must first ask which do you have more of, and second, how many more of those.